Madam Secretary, thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate
Oh,
it.
absolutely. Thank you for being with
I
me
want to
today.
talk about where we're standing. I want to talk about all the changes here on the border. But first, just two questions that are kind of top of day news
Sure.
questions. The first involves these three U.S. citizen children who left the U.S. with their mothers who were deported. I understand the idea that having an American child does not make you immune to deportation. But I'm curious about what rights or interests the child may have to have a childhood here in the United States.
Well, these mothers had the option to leave their children here, to take them with them, and they chose to take them with them. And that is what, this administration has been all about. President Trump has wanted to keep families together, and that's exactly what happened in these situations. So those individuals, kept their family together and returned home.
What do you make of the Trump-appointed judge in Louisiana who said he had a strong suspicion that a U.S. citizen, in this case the two-year-old, was deported without due process, or a meaningful due process?
I fundamentally disagree with that. I'm sure that these judges will continue to challenge every single thing that this administration does. We have several activist judges across the country that have made claims such as this, but that mother made a choice for her child and wanted to keep her child with her.
So if a relative here in the U.S. wants that child back and the mother agrees, the child will come back?
Yes, absolutely, and that's the process. This mother gave us documentation and fully said she wanted her child with her, and we honored that.
Okay. I want to talk about this incident that happened in the restaurant in Washington, D.C.
Oh, okay.
You were with your grandkids,
Yeah.
you had the purse, it was stolen. There have been arrests in this case. How confident are you that the people arrested were indeed undocumented migrants?
Very confident from the information that has been shared with me so far in the investigation, and I understand that they've been talking to them and getting information and getting these are career criminals. They have perpetuated crimes against many people in this country for many years illegally.
Is it just a coincidence that they happened to pick your purse?
I believe so. We were with a big family and 4 kids under the age of 4. I had it right between my feet. But he was professional in how he took it. And, we're just glad that now that he's in custody because of so many other crimes he's committed. He worked with other people to do this and has been doing it for years. So, this is what Americans shouldn't have to live with. It's not about me and it's not about my family as much as it is about that people live in communities that have been going through this for many, many years. So the more that we can bring these people in and have them face consequences and get them out of our country, the safer America will be.
Let's talk about where we're standing.
Yes.
Mexico to
Yes.
my left, America to
Yeah.
my right.
That's
This
right.
is the U.S.-Mexico border.
Right.
Does America right now, as we speak, have operational control of this border?
Well, it's difficult to say 100%, probably 98% operational control is a very true fact and statement, and that was President Trump's goal. He's 100 days into his administration, and it has been absolutely phenomenal what his leadership has brought. If you talk to all of these agents that have been down here for years, they say it's night and day difference from where we were a year ago, that they were overwhelmed and with illegals and people that were turning themselves in because they knew that they would be released into the United States undocumented with no consequences. Now, if they interdict anybody on this border, they're running away because they recognize that the policy has changed, that now we're enforcing the law.
So you touched on it a little bit there then, but so what explains this 95+% drop in the number of encounters or apprehensions along the border?
It explains by a president that is following the law. President Trump said he would secure our border. We had the federal laws on the books. They were just being ignored by the Biden administration. So that change and that willingness to go out and tell the world that it's different now in America, now we have borders and there'll be consequences if you break the law, that message has gotten out.
Has the rate of migrants coming to the border fallen to such an extent that you would no longer call it an emergency?
Oh, dramatically changed, absolutely. I would say that we still have an invasion going on because we still have dangerous people who are trying to come into this country, but the number of people has changed dramatically. In fact, February and March, we broke the national record for historic lows of encounters here at the border. So it's one day we had less than 200, which is phenomenal. Nobody ever dreamed that it would get to that kind of a of a process. But I would say that it's because President Trump not only started enforcing the law, he gave the resources and partnerships of all different agencies and cabinet members to come here and to work together in partnership. And then he talked about it and told me to go talk about it and told us to message in other countries to tell them that it's changed in America, stop them before they even get here. In fact, when I was in Mexico and visiting with some officials there, they were saying that they feel 500 to 600,000 people turned around in Mexico before they even reached our border. So those are numbers that we never saw here because they turned around while they were still in Mexico and went back home.
Speaking of dangerous people, we're here on the Mexico border. Mexico's to my left.
Right.
Why do we have this vehicle right here blocking a view of you?
Well, because we have a situation where, as we enforce the law, criminals are getting more and more aggressive, and even our law enforcement officers have seen a 300% increase in aggression and attacks on them. It has been a process where you're fighting foreign terrorist organizations, cartels, and gangs, and safety is always a concern.
Cartels make money off of smuggling people into the U.S.
Absolutely.
Is the idea that by taking you out, or you would be a target because to eliminate you, their job might get easier?
I believe that that would be one of their thoughts. I haven't heard that myself
It's not
from
a credible
them.
threat that you're
It is a
acting to right
credible
now.
threat, yes.
It is a credible threat.
There's threats out there against several administration officials, and so we still operate. We go out and spend time with these agents, go out and see the work that is being done, because every time I'm out with all of these individuals, I'm learning from them what authorities they have, what they need, what equipment they need, the new technologies the cartels are using. Today we were talking about drones and how they're using drones now for surveillance on our border and to try to get people into the country, drugs and humans and trafficking. So having that kind of insight into what they really need to enforce the law is important.
Let's talk about the people who have already crossed the U.S.-Mexico border and now reside in the United States.
Right.
Without documentation.
Right.
How large is that population?
Well, there's reports up to 11 to 20 million people.
And is the goal to eliminate every one of those individuals from the U.S.?
Well, the goal is to make sure that there's consequences. We want a lot of them to self-deport. The CBP Home app that's on their phones, they can go on there and register and self-deport, and if they do that, then they can come back. They'll get in line and get a chance to come back to the United States. The consequences now are, if they don't, and if we sweep them up and have to remove them ourselves, they'll never get the chance to come back to the United States of America. So our hope is that many of these people will choose to go home, and then we could get them scheduled for a hearing to come back the right way.
I hear this message of self-deport, this idea of making it uncomfortable to continue staying here because the stakes are high.
Right.
I'm reminded of an interview President Trump gave shortly after he was elected, in which he said, if I'm too nice, people try to come here illegally. And it makes me wonder, to what extent is being not nice in the messaging, even being mean where it seems appropriate, is part of the strategy?
Well, that's why he wanted me to be out there communicating that there's consequences for breaking the law. You've seen the commercials. You saw me go and visit several of our facilities, even go to El Salvador and show where terrorists were going to be held if they were caught up and deported out of our country. We go there to show and talk about the fact that there are severe consequences for breaking the law in the United States of America. And if you're a member of those two gangs, that is somewhere you could go. So I think making sure that we were telegraphing that and talking about that was very important early on in the administration, so people realized that if you do continue to break the law and you're a criminal and you're perpetuating violence in the United States, then there's going to be harsh consequences and you're going to go home.
So all these dramatic pictures of raids, of Socote, of that prison in El Salvador, the message there is self-deport now, or this could be you.
Absolutely. That is absolutely the message, is that you have the option to go home on your own terms. We'll help you with a plane ticket. We'll get you booked. We'll facilitate it, and you get the chance to come back.
Is harshness part of the message when it comes to the removal of mothers who have American children?
No, I think that with families, we recognize that families can stay together. And so these mothers get the option to take their children with them, which I think is absolutely where President Trump's heart is.
Should those non-American mothers have that option, or should the American children have a right to stay
I
here?
think the mothers should have the option to have their children with them. And then if those mothers do leave and choose to register and self-deport, them and their children can come back, or if they want to have their child cared for by somebody else in the United States, that's an option that they can pursue too.
Let's talk about due process.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you can reach your goal of millions of deportations while also maintaining due process rights in the U.S.?
I do, absolutely. And when it comes to illegal criminals, in the United States of America, there's court cases on what due process is, what it is, and where the Supreme Court has come down. There have been decisions different directions, but definitely we can. We've been doing this correctly. We've been building cases. We've been going after the worst of the worst, and doing it the right way.
Why do a seemingly growing number of federal judges seem to disagree with you on these due process questions?
I would say we've got activist judges everywhere. If you see where they are and where they're located, they're challenging decisions because we've got outside activist groups bringing court cases against us. That's why President Trump is using every single authority that he has available to him under the executive branch. Under the office of president, he's going to use the authorities that he has to make America safe again.
But you know as well as I do that the Trump-appointed judge in Louisiana, I don't think you would call him an activist. You've got this Reagan-appointed judge, Wilkinson, who said with the El Salvador extradition flights or deportations, he said, in effect, the government was asserting a right to stash away people without any semblance of due process, which is the foundation of our government.
Yeah.
He's not an activist, is he?
There is definite legal opinions on both sides of that issue, and that's why we have a court system, so that decisions like that can be appealed, and the Supreme Court can make decisions ultimately that will give us much more clarity on what due process is, what it's defined by, and what it is followed on.
This is really interesting and I think important because sometimes I talk to voters and they think they have to choose between deporting everybody who's here illegally or upholding the Constitution. You can have one or the other, choose
Well,
one.
you need to remember that the people that are here and living in the United States and are citizens are protected by that Constitution. And so that's where you always need the clarity on all those other individuals that aren't necessarily U.S. citizens, and how do you interact with them, and especially when they're criminals and members of terrorist organizations. These terrorist organizations are the ones that some of these judges have challenged, and there's a totally different application there.
The terrorist and gang member aspect of this is really important as well. Nobody I've ever spoken to, and I've been to all 50 states talking to voters, wants would-be terrorist or gang members in the country, or violent criminals of any kind.
Right.
And nobody forgets or discounts the pain of families who've lost loved ones to those people. But when they see these deportations of terrorists or gang members, according to the government, how do they know that those people on the flights in the chains are actually terrorists and gang members?
We have spent hours and hours building cases against them. We have the victims that speak up, that they have perpetuated crimes against. Our HSI team, along with our three-letter agencies, DOD is in partnership as well, our Department of Justice. That's what's so unique about President Trump's administration, is it's the first time you truly have a whole of government approach to make sure we're doing the right thing. And overwhelmingly, America is with him on this, on making sure that these dangerous individuals are removed from our country. He is set on the fact that these communities need to be safe, and that we shouldn't let terrorist organizations run free in our country to victimize our families anymore.
Everybody I've ever spoken to agrees with you on that point, absolutely. But without a trial in any traditional sense, without that due process, how can voters be sure that the people going away are in fact as bad as you say? Are you saying that your administration has never and will never make an error in determining who should be deported?
Well, that's a big statement to make, but obviously we're relying on the expertise of our investigators, our teams, double checking, triple checking, going through the paperwork, making sure that we've done everything absolutely correctly. And that is one thing that I've been so impressed by, is the professionalism of all of our groups and our agents and our law enforcement officers, and the partnerships we have. This is the first time we've really truly had federal officers doing raids alongside state officers, even local law enforcement. It's been remarkable to see that. And then you have the ATF and the DEA, and you have DOJ officials all there at the same location, double checking and using all databases to make sure these individuals are who they say they are and that they're affiliated with the terrorist organization they're a part of.
Let's talk about the potential for people who do self-deport to potentially come back in.
Right.
In that same Wall Street Journal interview that the president gave shortly after he was elected, he said at one point, he said, there's nuanced cases.
Yeah.
It's complex, and you have to have a heart.
Yeah.
What is the role of heart in this immigration conversation we're having?
Oh, there's heart in all of it. It's people. It's people and it's families, and I think that's one of the reasons why the president trusted me with this job, is because he knew I was strong enough to do the job. He knew that I would, when he gave direction to enforce the law, that I would do it, but he also knew that I've been a governor, but I'm also a wife and a mom and a grandmother, and that I would explain and talk to the American people and talk to people that are impacted and work with them to make sure that everything that we do, we're doing with the best intentions to take care of people while we enforce the law.
So you want the U.S. to still have a welcoming attitude to legal immigration?
Absolutely, and that's part of our process we need to fix. We have a very slow, broken legal immigration system, and that's one of the things I've been working extensively with members of Congress on. I served in Congress for a period of time, and there was no consensus around what the fix could be, but we can't have people waiting for years to come here legally and to go through the paperwork. We need more immigration courts, and we need more immigration judges. I'm working with the Department of Justice on that now. I think my ability to know what it is to be a member of Congress, to see what we went through in this country, and to be an advocate from this role now will help us fix a broken immigration system that needed to be fixed a long time ago.
All of this attention surrounds the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case.
Yes.
The Supreme Court ruling, which on the one hand wanted deference to the executive and its ability to make foreign policy decisions. On the other hand, the Supreme Court said that the government must facilitate his return to the U.S. What have you done, Madam Secretary, to help facilitate his return to the U.S.?
This is the president's decision and the White House's decision. So we follow his direction and his legal scholars and attorneys. And, he is not under our control. He is an El Salvador citizen. He is home there in his country. If he were to be brought back to the United States of America, we would immediately deport him again. So the continuation of this conversation going on and on, I'm not certain what people think a different outcome would be. Because the individual would come back and immediately we would put him in proceedings to be removed again.
You would fight that underlying do not deport ruling, which is at the heart of all this.
I would fight the underlying do not deport?
Yeah, there was an earlier ruling in his case that said he had a credible fear.
Yes.
And I understand that you think that no longer holds, but this gets into where people are like, well, wait a minute, are they following the courts or are they not? Are they defying the courts or are they listening to the courts?
No, President Trump and his administration has adhered to the court and respects the court and its decisions. This individual is not under the United States of America's jurisdiction, and he is not one of our citizens. He is home in his home country, and that's up to that country to decide what to do.
Recently you were in Arizona, in Phoenix.
Yeah.
Big expo. Todd Lyons, the acting director of ICE, he made a comment that's gotten a lot of attention. He wanted to modernize the process of deportations and run it a bit like Amazon, he said, runs it with packages. Quick turn deportations. Do with human beings what Amazon does with packages.
That hasn't been a conversation of policy that we've had, as far as doing that. We'll continue to run operations like we do today, continue the partnerships that we have, but we have a lot more individuals that need to be removed. There's literally thousands of criminals still in this country that are endangering people in communities and cities, and so we want to continue those partnerships and build on them.
It sounds like that was a pull-aside conversation with Todd in which he said, we don't want to use that language anymore. I
never even talked to Todd about that statement that he made, so.
Are you comfortable with the Amazon comparison?
No, I wouldn't do that, but I think that, we are a professional organization that upholds the law and law enforcement officers, and But we do need to make sure that we don't want people to be here and be in detention centers for long periods of time. We want to process them in a timely manner, make sure that we do the proceedings correctly, and then get them home.
Thank you very much, Madam
Yeah,
Secretary. I
thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thank
You
you.
too.